So, first of all, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Bamidbar Sinai be'ol moed be'echad lachodesh hasheni. The first day of the second month, b'shana hasheni slotzeis l'meretz Mitzrayim lemor. The book of Bamidbar is called Numbers, which we normally would translate Bamidbar as desert. All right, so this is one of the things I always wondered about, why it's called Numbers, and the reason is because the Jewish people are counted several times in this Sefer Bamidbar. That's why it's called the Book of Numbers. Bereshis is called Genesis. Because Genesis, I guess, means the beginning of some sort, right? And then taken modestly by a rock group. But what do you call it? Somehow it means beginning. Shmos is called Exodus, even though I would translate it as names. And see, in Hebrew, it's generally the first word that appears. Bereshis, Eile Shmos B'nai Yisrael. Vayikra Hashem, it's called by the first name. That's what we refer to in Vayikra. Bamidbar, over here, you're not going to call it Sefer Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, so you call it Bamidbar, because that's the first unique word that appears in the what do you call it? Then you have Dvarim. It's like Eile HaDvarim, I sure right. So, but what do you call it? So Shmos is called Exodus because that's when they left Egypt. That's the theme. Vayikra is called Leviticus, because the Medrash, the halachic Medrash on Sefer Vayikra is called Torah Leviim, because you got all the laws of the Kohanim and the Leviim and Vayikra, the Korbanos, that sort of thing. Bamidbar is called Numbers, and Dvarim is called Deuteronomy, right? So I always wondered, what is they deutered? You know, that's what they deutered. What is? You know where it comes from? Shkoyach. It's a Greek term. Gee, I thought it was, how do you like that? I thought it was Irish. What do you yeah, Deuteronomy is a Greek term. Where does it come from? You know where it comes from? Two. Deuce. The root of the word is deuce, Deuteronomy, because it's called what do you call it? A Mishnah Torah. They repeat the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu repeats a lot of halachas, and because it's called Moshe Mishnah Torah, they call it Deuteronomy. There's a great trivia question. You ask somebody why Dvarim is called Deuteronomy. Oh, they deutered. Oh, okay. Talis, tefillin, and deutering. I never knew what that meant. In any event, that's the so Sefer Bamidbar is called because they get counted. Now, the first thing you notice in the first pasuk is the commentaries point out, and there are a lot of little nuanced ideas here. The commentaries point out, "Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Bamidbar Sinai be'ohel moed." Right. So here you have first the general place. It's the Bamidbar Sinai, and then you have the specific place in the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting. Yet, at the end of the pasuk, it says, "B'chodesh be'echad lachodesh hasheni," says the specific time, "B'shana hasheni," it's in a more general time. So first it starts with the more general, then gets specific. The general place was the desert. The specific is the Ohel Moed. And then it goes to the specific, which is the first day of the second month, the first day of the first the first day of the second month, and then more general of the second year. But why do you have this flip-flop? Why do you have the flip-flop? And so the answer is that, when a person, Rahman al-Islam, somebody goes to comfort mourners, what do you say when you leave the mourner's home? What do you say? Hamokom yanachem eschem. We don't say Hashem shall comfort you. We say Hamokom yanachem. The place shall comfort you, which is a reference to Hashem. That's what Hamokom is. And the reason we do that is because Hashem is the makom of the world. The world is in Hashem. Hashem isn't in the world. The world is in Hashem. He is the makom. He is the place of the world. So, one of the commentaries, one of the Meforshim says, I'm going to stop calling them commentaries. They're Meforshim. You guys know what Meforshim means. I don't have to call it commentaries. But for those who don't know, Meforshim is commentaries. Okay. Now, one of the Meforshim says that this is the specific before the general. The Midbar Sinai is not the general, that's a specific place. The more general place is Ohel Moed, because that's the concentration of Hashem's divine presence. In the same way that Hashem is the makom of the world, wherever His presence is, that is the general place. That's what contains everything. So the Shechina is in the where the Shekhinah is concentrated, whatever that means. Where the Shekhinah is concentrated, that is the general place. That's the main place. The Midbar is in the Midbar is in the Ohr Moed. The Ohr Moed is not in the Midbar. Very, very strange concept. Try that on someone outside the Torah world. Why? Because Hashem is in the Ohr Moed. So the Midbar is really in Hashem. By the way, one of the reasons why we also use the word Hamakom was, why do we say, Steve, can I trouble you to make it colder if you know how? Maybe put on a black hat to do it. What do you call it? No, he's planning on buying one soon. Thank you. One of the reasons we say Hamakom when comforting a mourner, so I heard this from Rav Mendel Weinbach, that's all the Yeshivat Ohr Somayach. He said, when a person obviously suffers a loss, it's painful. And a person isn't crying for the person who was deceased. The person is crying really for the pain that they themselves are suffering. Sometimes crying for the person one could have accomplished more, and so on and so forth. But what we say is, Hamakom, the place that their neshama occupies, Hamakom Yanachem, page 726. The place that their neshama occupies now should be a comfort to you, to the person who's left behind. That means to realize that the person who lived the life properly, they'll be in Gan Eden and Hamakom Yanachem. Number one. Number two, there's an interesting medrash right here at the beginning of of Sefer Bamidbar, and the medrash says, "Begimel dvarim haTorah nitna." The Torah was given through three mediums. It was given through the medium be'esh, fire, uvamayim, water, uvamidbar, and in the desert. That's why the Medrash connects up to here. The Medrash says there were three mediums through which the Torah was given. It was given through fire, it was given through water, and it was given through a desert. And there's a lot of discussion among the Meforshim. What is that Medrash alluding to? What does that mean? The Torah was given through fire, through water, and through a midbar, or in a midbar. What does that mean? So one of the opinions is that, well, if you're going to study Torah, there are several ingredients needed to study Torah. And the first one is fire. What does fire represent always? Passion. Very good. In other words, you got to be enthusiastic about it. Anything in life that's important, you're enthusiastic about it. If you're not enthusiastic, A, you're not going to do it very well. And B, it just doesn't mean it's important to you. Watch a couple of guys discussing sports. Watch sports fans talking about discussing sports. It's like they're solving the world's problems. Right? You know, I mean, this is serious stuff. You know, this is really, really important. You know, about who pitched, who was the relief pitcher who came on in the seventh inning. I mean, how could your life go on without that? Listen, when the Bulls won the championships in the '90s, I made my wife memorize their starting team. You know, this was something that she's just going to have to know. You know, these things are important. But when you're really, by the way, my wife once said to me, "Why do you remember sports trivia so well and you don't remember Tosfos as well?" And I said, "Yeah, that is a problem, isn't it?" That's a problem right there. Yeah. So she once cut out in Reader's Digest. I go into my room and I see on my desk there's like a little story from Reader's Digest. You used to have good little stories. Now Reader's Digest is also indecent, but in the old days, so there's a story. This guy's taking a bath, and his wife is standing at the door. And she says, "Tom, what were Don Mattingly's statistics in 1985?" He's a baseball player for the Yankees. He guy's like, "Wow, my wife's getting interested in baseball. This is great." He goes, "Well, he had 25 homers. They batted .330 and had 116 RBIs." Something like that. She says, "How come you can remember that? And you can't remember to take the garbage when I tell you to?" So I said to my wife, "Wow, it's a great story. I'm going to use that for sure. That's a great story. Thanks." She says to me, "Take the garbage, dummy." A true story. So it wasn't funny. So the what do you call it? So the first ingredient you need is passion. To learn Torah, you got to be passionate about it. You got to be really interested in it. Number one. Number two, water. What does water always symbolize?
Knowledge.
Water could be knowledge. Water symbolizes. One of the characteristics of water is that water always sinks to the lowest level. Water is humility. And person number one has to be willing to humble himself in the face of Torah. And if you don't learn a Tosfos, right? Tosos is humbling, right? In case you're not humble, in case we're not humble enough, just try learning a Tosos. Tosos is the great equalizer, right? You think you got it worked out because you can get through a piece of Gemara, then start with Tosos, right? Tosos humbles you, number one. Number two, we got to be willing to learn from anybody. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi compiled the Mishnah. He said, I learned a lot from my Rebbeim. I learned more from my colleagues. Umi talmidai yoser mikulam. I learned most from my disciples. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, and it's true. And a person has to be willing to. Maybe somebody's got a good insight. Maybe somebody, no, I know enough that I don't have to listen to somebody else. Person needs humility. And number three is the Midbar. The Torah is given in a Midbar. Why? Because the Midbar symbolizes a detachment from from material pursuits. There's very little materialism in a desert. When you go out to a desert, so you better be well equipped to go out to the desert. You have a lot of water with you, some basics of water, bread, that sort of thing, because you're not going to find it out there. And therefore, if a person wants to really get serious about Torah, number one, there has to be a certain passion. You have to develop an interest in it. It takes time. You know, the Gemara compares Torah to various liquids. Torah is compared to water, ein mayim ela Torah. Torah is compared to wine. I compare Torah to beer. Because beer, the first time you drink it, doesn't taste so good. I mean, beer is not a delicious taste. You got to develop a taste for it, right? Isn't that what they always say? Well, you got to develop it. It's an acquired taste. It's an acquired taste. Yeah. It's an acquired taste. But we'll be moser nefesh to acquire that taste, right? We'll do anything to acquire that taste. I never did, by the way. I can't stand the stuff. But the what do you call it? And I confess this publicly too. When on those rare occasions that I drink beer, Rafi, you're going to be horrified. On those rare occasions that I drink beer, I drink it at room temperature. Yeah, I told you, I knew this was coming. No, I'm not British, but it's that I want to knock it down and get the effect as soon as possible. If you drink it when it's cold, so you're going to get brain freeze, and I don't want that. So I just knock it down. I try to kind of don't breathe, and I just knock it down as fast. I can't stand the taste, but I just want to get the effect. So I'm just saying. But listen, that just shows you I could be honest, okay? I knew what the reaction would be. My brother swears by. He says that what he called a cold Michelob on tap. He said, that's no good, huh? He says on tap though. It's got to be on tap. Ugh. Whatever it is, that's the first thing. I once had my kid, just to give you a tip, how to be a father. I was once sitting on a Friday night. Don't ask me why. I had a beer in the house for some reason. Somebody, I think, was left over from Mishlach Manos on Purim. So I had a beer. So it's Friday night. My kid is about 6 years old, my oldest son. And I poured some beer. And he says to me, he says, see, I told you this, right? He says, Daddy, I want some. I said, you're not going to like it. He says, I'll like it. So I started to argue, and I said, no, you're not, here. And I just poured him the beer, right? So he takes this beer, he picks it up, he takes a drink, and he looked at me. He gave me a look. The look was a double look. It was like, as soon as he drank, he goes like this. It was like, oh, you tricked me. Oh, no, you didn't. You told me, right? Because it was horrible. It's just horrible, right? And now he's done it to his kid. He does this to his kid. His kid's 3 years old. The Daddy, I want some. I forgot what it was. We're sitting at Shabbos table. He says, I want it. And he looked at it and says, oh, you do, okay? And he gave it to him. Right? Kid didn't like it. At least he learned something from me. So what do you call it? That is as far as what idea. There's another idea that there are two levels here. By the way, one of the Forshim says that we find 3 times that the Jews are willing to die for Torah. Avram Avinu was willing to go into the fire by Nimrod, dying for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Jewish people went into the Yam Suf, that's water, and the Jewish people went out to the desert. You think that the Moshe Rabbeinu says, all right, everybody, let's go. They're coming out of Mitzrayim. Now, let's go out to the desert. You got no equipment, you got no provisions, you're heading out to the desert. I mean, you have to think, oh yeah, we saw so many miracles, we'll do this. So it doesn't work that way. That was yesterday. What's tomorrow's? Where are we going to eat? I got 5 kids over here. They're having 6 at a time. A small family only had 24 kids. What about the Schwartzes down the block with 60? What happens over there? If imagine a family of 8 today means that there were 54 kids. Right? A family of 12, you've seen family of 12, what's 12 times 6? 72 kids. Let's go, tribe. Kids, family, let's go. You understand? We're going to feed these people. So there's A Mesiras Nefesh going out to the desert. But there's another level. The commentaries say that when a person has to have passion, fire represents the attitude towards the positive commands of the Torah. We have to do the positive. We have to have an energy to do the positive commands. That's fire. Water always represents slow, lazy. To the contrary, their idea is that water is heaviness. That means when it comes to the losases, to the prohibitions, we have to be able to demonstrate a certain heaviness to not do them. What's the midbar? What's the midbar? The midbar represents the detachment that allows us to absorb the Torah ideas, so then we could decide if we should do this mitzvah or not. Should I activate my fire for this or not? In other words, sometimes you see a mitzvah is available, but you have to make a decision, should I do this mitzvah? Do you know how many times over the years I've been asked, I've mentioned this before, I've been asked by guys over the years at Ohr Somayach, should we go downtown and beat up missionaries? Isn't it a mitzvah? Right? I've been asked that many times. Very few guys say, should we go to the Beis Medrash and learn Tosfos? That doesn't happen as often. But should we go? I'm telling you, I've been asked that many times. The answer obviously is no. But you could convince yourself that something is a mitzvah. I know guys who say, I have a mitzvah to do. I know a guy who travels around the world. He abandons his wife and kids to go do the mitzvah of doing outreach in other parts of the world. And literally abandons his wife and children. That's your mitzvah. That's your mitzvah. You have to activate the judgment to know when it's a proper mitzvah and when it's not. That's the idea. Okay. Take a look at Pasuk Beis. And this is an intriguing point. Extremely important. 3 lines from the top. Se'u'es rosh kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. Take a head count of all the congregation. L'mishpechosam, by their families, the beis avosam, by their through their ancestors. B'mispar shemos, by the number of names. Kol zocher l'gulgulosam, every male by their heads. Now, the first thing you notice in this pasuk is they seem to be a contradiction. Because the Torah says, count them b'mispar shemos, by the number of their names. What does that mean? What does that mean, the number of their names? What does that mean? How do you count the number of names? If I say Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, I'm not counting, I'm just saying names. If I say 1, 2, 3, 4, I am counting. So what does it mean by the number of their names? There is an opinion that they wrote their names on notes, and Moshe Rabbeinu counted the notes. That's if you need to make it fit the plain meaning or of the pasuk, that they wrote their names on the notes, or there's an opinion that they actually announced their names and Moshe Rabbeinu would count how many names they were announcing. But there's a much more, there's something over here that's a very penetrating lesson for us, and that is like this. Every Jew has to know that on the one hand you're a number, on the other hand you're a name. What does that mean? A number means you're part of the group. If I say you're number 4 doesn't exist in a vacuum. Number 4 means there are 3 before you and maybe some more after you. Every Jew is a number. That means, first of all, we're part of a group. We're a mispar. On the other hand, we're shemos. What is a shem? What's a name? A name is each person's individual identity. You know, the word neshama, you probably know this already, but the word neshama, the 2 middle letters of neshama is shem, mem, shem, your name. A name at a certain level is a description of your essence. It's a description of your task in life, and it's a description of your essence. Parents, when they name a child at birth, so the child is, the parents, we have a tradition that at the moment they name a child, they're gripped with a certain Ruach HaKodesh. Unless they give a completely inappropriate name. If it's an inappropriate name, that's not Ruach HaKodesh. Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky used to tell people not to give modern names, they make up these modern Hebrew names. And Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, some guy showed up with names that was Ofer, for example. Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, it's not a name. Give a different, we're going to call you Ephraim. Make your name Ephraim. They give a name. But when the parents give an appropriate name, in modern Hebrew, unfortunately, in Israel at one point, it could be still today, the name Nimrod was a very, very popular name. Right, because Nimrod is described in the Torah as being very, very strong, very brave and strong. And Nimrod, the root of Nimrod is mered, which means to rebel. He led a rebellion against God. So we'd rather not call our kids Nimrod. Somehow Yitzchak is a better name. But Nimrod is, so when the parents have Ruach, when they give a child a name, they actually have a certain Ruach HaKodesh there. Now, even if, let's say, the grandfather's name was Yaakov and the uncle's name was Shmuel, but so the parents are making a whole calculation. We'll call him Yaakov or we'll call him Shmuel. Maybe we'll call them both. And then in the end, they say, well, I like Shmuel better. We'll call him Shmuel Yaakov, especially since he gave better gifts. So we'll call him Shmuel Yaakov. At the end of the day, all those calculations that the kid, that was Ruach HaKodesh. There's an element. So it's a description of somehow your role. I know a kid, by the way. Oh, this was a good one. The parents couldn't decide what to name the kid. I know the people. They couldn't decide what to name the kid. So they're at the bris itself, and they're still working on what are we going to name him. So the mother wanted the kid to be called Chaim. So she said to what do you call it? She said to the husband, he was standing on the other side of the Mechitz. Remember starting the bris. He says, so what should we call him? She says, Chaim. He says, what? He says, Chaim, like the Chafetz Chaim. He says, okay, V'yikrei Shema Yisrael Meir. Because that was the Chafetz Chaim. Then she thought she wanted him named after the Chafetz Chaim. His name wasn't Chafetz Chaim. His name was Yisrael Meir. She said Chafetz. I know, that was not good. Then there was another woman who her husband decided to be creative. They decided on the name. I think the name decided on was Dovid. And then they, at the bris, he says, V'yikrei Shema Yisrael, Dovid Klonimus. And the wife is like, what? Where did at the last minute, the husband got creative. It was tuna fish for him that night. So first of all, a person has a dual role. Number one, you're a part of a community, and number two, you have an individual role. Each person has their individual task wherever your neshama takes you. Some people are more focused on study, some people might be more focused on davening, some people more focused on chesed. You have your individual task. We got to do two things. We are a mispar and we're shemos. Now, I just want to tell you, this is extremely important, and people often forget this. When you're part of a group, and this often happens in yeshivas, not just here, in many yeshivas, there's a benefit to being part of the group, and there's, like everything else, there's a plus and a minus. Sometimes the group makes a decision, or the group is doing something, and individuals want to do things differently than the group. Because objectively, as an individual, it would be better for me not to do what the group is doing. That happens, and it's true. On the other hand, allowing yourself to be part of the group carries other benefits, and you can't have both. You can't always have both. And this is especially true when people live in communities. Every shul, and Rabbi, a very big Rav once said, he was a Rav in certain communities. Every community, you have the same people, they just have slightly different names, right? There's the guy who loves the rabbi. There's the guy who can't stand the rabbi. There's the guy who's like the hacker and the doer in the community. There's the guy who's always kvetching about something. Every community has a korach, and every community has an Aaron. Every community is like that. They just have different names. There's the same people with different names, different roles and different names in every community. When you're a member of the community, you're all going to leave one day, Be'ez Hashem, you get married, have family, you'll be part of a community. You're going to be, and I'm telling you right now, you're not going to be happy with every decision the shul makes. You're not going to be happy with every decision your community makes. And you have to know that in the long run, you're going to lose more by fighting. You just have to learn. Listen, I don't necessarily like it, but this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. You move to Israel. A lot of people move to Israel from Chutz La'aretz, and the Chutz La'aretz things were different. And then you come to Israel, and things are different. My brother used to tell me, what works on 110 in electricity doesn't work on 220. On 220, it burns. If you plug something that works on 110 voltage, and you plug it into 220, which Israel's 220, it burns out. And you got to get used to that. And if you're not going to make that adjustment, so don't even bother trying. But don't come here or go somewhere and start fighting. Don't go somewhere. Just be willing to be mevatel your das. Be willing to give in to the community and community decisions. You're a mispar and you're a shame. You're a number. You're part of a community, but you have to achieve your individual goals, your individual potentials in life. Number one. Number two, if it says at the end of the pasuk, b'mispar shemos kol zochar legulgalosam. Every male, by their head count. Now, by their head. Now, the first problem you have here is once you say kol zochar, why does it emphasize by head? Every male, most males have heads. right? Why does it say that? Legulgulosam. So, anybody got an idea? Why is the Torah emphasized? What do you say?
Not allowed to count Jews.
So how are they counting it at all? But Gulgulosam doesn't help you, so you're going to count their heads. He's not part of the Jew. You count their yarmulkes, right? So there was a machatzis shekel that was given. There wasn't a machatzis shekel. The commentators talk about why over here. The machatzis shekel was a suggestion. Here, it's a Torah command, so they can command nothing bad happens when you fulfill a Torah command. So why is it that they throws in the word? But it says the base of it calls zachar legulgulosam. Why? Close. What? Getting close. By the way, it's really really important. Bring one more point. Now, people always say Haredis have no individualism. Okay? We're all a bunch of clones, black-hatted, black-jacketed clones, because they're a bunch of penguins, right? No individuality, right? No individuality. Yet, it's ironic that the person saying it, he went to public school 14, he was in class 7B, he himself was a number his whole life. In the Haredi world, to the contrary, we may look the same, but in every community, you have the rabbi, you have the gabbai, you have the guy who runs the school. Everybody's got an individual role to give. In communities, I see people on the street. These are guys who have jobs in the community. Every guy's tremendous amount of individuality. And to the contrary, sometimes people don't conform the uniform. They won't wear the uniform. And people think that by not wearing the uniform, they're showing their independence. A person who isn't willing to wear the uniform is coming from a lack of self-confidence. Unless I dress differently, where's my individuality? A person who's willing to dress like everybody else, that means I'm confident enough in my inner development that I don't have to make the declaration with my outer. And you find this in Yiddishkeit as well. You find it in Judaism as well. A person is not willing, a person has to dress slightly differently, to make a statement. And the more a person's willing to conform, the more that shows the confidence with what he's got some quality inside of him. So the Torah is telling you over here, when we count people, there may be a temptation. The temptation may be that we're going to count. Somebody's a Torah scholar, he's a 5. Right? It's like stratego. You get a number, right? Somebody who's an ordinary Jew, he's a 2. Somebody's on a lesser level, you only count as 1. This person comes along and says, Kol Zochar, every male, Ligulgulosam, everybody's 1. Everybody counts as 1. Why is that? Because we don't know in the eyes of heaven who counts as more. Maybe down here we do. There's a certain priority system down here. If you have one honor to give, so it has to go to the Talmud Chacham. But we don't know in the eyes of Hashem who's doing better, because in the eyes of Hashem it has to do with how much challenge a person has overcome, how much potential a person is fulfilling. And so we've spoken about that many times. But one of the Forshim says, that's why it says Legulgulosam, because the word Legulgulosam alludes to the concept of Gilgul, which is reincarnation. That means every individual, we can't know how much a person's worth, because in his previous life he may have been a very big Torah scholar and he came back in this world as a simple Jew just to get one thing straight, to fulfill one mitzvah. So in the overall package, we have no idea who's what. So there's a concept called Gilgul. There's an idea that a person could come around. By the way, the Swarm say a person who is immoral could come back as a dog. That's very bad. And what do you call it? And part of the, dog doesn't look like he has such a bad life, even though they use the expression, it's a dog's life. But the Kabbalists, which I know nothing about, but I can only tell you what they say. I don't know the first thing about it. But the Kabbalists say that a person who is reincarnated as an animal is aware of his existence as a human being in a previous life. Yeah, that's bad. Right. When you come back as a human, some people think that they say that deja vu. People say, well, deja vu is that maybe like reincarnation. I think deja vu is more likely to be drug flashback than reincarnation. But there is a concept in Judaism of reincarnation, and since we don't know what the neshama was in a previous life, and so on and so on. Do you know I ever tell you that the Gemara says Isha Tova Matana Tova Labala? So the Gemara says a good wife is a precious gift to her husband. You ever hear that expression? Isha Tova Matana Tova Labala. So the Ben Ish Chai explains, why is she called a gift? And you're not going to be happy to hear this, gentlemen, but I'm just going to tell you anyway. I wasn't happy to hear it either. Ben Ish Chai says that a man may have messed up in his previous incarnation. This couple was married once before. She ran up bills then too. But this couple was married once before, and the husband messed up. The wife got it right. And she's brought back in this incarnation in order to help him get it right this time. So she's actually a gift. She doesn't really have to be here.
So she's always right.
Is she always right? Well, we certainly don't want to tell them that, but if you're asking me privately, off camera, yeah. But at the end, not always, but a high percentage. So she's brought back to help him get it right, which is often why maybe some conversations you have with your wife, you sense, we talked about this once, didn't we? Could have been in a previous life. So I always tell the girls, never bring that up. If you're having a fight, wife says, like, you know what, I don't really have to be here. I'm only here because of you. Because the husband can say, well, we could arrange for you to go back. So you got it's it's not the first thing you're going to tell a wife on a shidduch. But at the end of the day, that's what the Gilgul is. So since there's a concept of Gilgul, we don't know who's worth more. Now, why does it say, this is a very question in Pashup Shot. Look at the very next pasuk. It says, Mi ben esrim shana v'mala kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael. It says from 20 years and on, anybody who went out to the tzava. We'll talk about what tzava means, what it really means in a second. But the count is, who did they count here? Who counts in this count? The males between the ages of 20 and 60. So nobody can say, oh, that's not fair to the women. You can't say it's not fair to the women because it's not fair to the men either who are not 20 or 60, between 20 and 60. So if already, we're cutting people out, so don't, what do you call it? They can't say, well, are you against the women? What about the older men? What about the younger kids? What about the guys 19 and a half? So they forget about that. At the end of the day, it's between the men between 20 and 60. The problem is, if you look at the previous pasuk, in pasuk Bey, it's 3 lines from it. It says, Se'ues rosh kol adas b'nei Yisrael l'mishpachotzam. It says, count all the Jews. It says, count all of them. Kol adas b'nei Yisrael. That's what my chumash says. Lebeis avosam. And kol zocher l'go mi ben esrim shah. Then it qualifies it down. Right? Okay, so it could be that's what, first you're giving a general instruction, then you're giving a specific. But the Farshim say, this is from the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai says that who's counted as a member of Klal Yisrael? What about Jews who've drifted away? What about Jews who've drifted away from? As long as, the Ben Ish Chai says, as long as they're lebeis avosam, as long as they stay loyal to the line of Judaism, meaning they don't marry out, these people they're members of Klal Yisrael. Listen, a guy who marries out is also a Jew. He's also a Jew, but we're talking about who do we relate? A guy who marries out, we relate to differently. Somebody who marries out, we they're kind of off the radar. A Jew who's, in many cases, doesn't even know better. He never had an opportunity to learn. He's what's called a tinok shenishba. That's a member of Klal Yisrael, and it's extremely important that when we object, for example, when we object to the reform, or we object to conservative, we object to various movements because they're off. We're objecting to the ideal, we're not objecting to the individuals. If a Reformed Jew has a flat tire on the highway, you stop your car and you help him. We don't ostracize the people, we ostracize the false ideal. It's very, very important. Same thing with non-Jews. We don't believe Catholicism is correct. We don't believe that Islam is correct. There's nothing wrong with helping a Catholic with a flat tire, and there's nothing helping a Muslim with a flat tire, as long as just don't do something foolish, right? Make sure make sure he's by you and you're not by him, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not talking about as a human being. There's nothing wrong with helping him. As a human being, you should. Our objection is to the ideal, not to the individual. That has to be kept in mind. Okay, now take a look at pasuk. I want to show you a little bit of razzle dazzle now. Take a look at pasuk ches. Yeah. Okay. Where is it? Okay. Now it goes through a little bit of what's in the name. So it says Yisachar, 4 lines to the bottom. Nisanel ben Tzuar. That's the head of the tribe of. He's the one who is going to help Moshe Rabbeinu. In every tribe, somebody's going to help them count the members of their tribe. So if you take a look, first it says it says, Li Yisachar, the tribe of Yisachar, Nesanel ben Tzuar. So, what's in a name? What did the tribe of Yisachar do? What was their involvement? What was their task? Yisachar and Zvulun. You've heard of Yisachar and Zvulun. They were learning Torah. Okay? So now take a look at the name of the person who counted with them. Nesan Kel. Right? What God gave, which is what? The Torah. The Torah. Nesanel, that's the tribe of Yisachar. Nesanel, what Hashem gave. Ben Su'ar. If you take out the vav, remember vavs are disposable, right? So what are you left with? What are you left with? Tsar, which is what?
Toil.
Toil, difficulty. Oh, who has to toil? Who runs through the toil? The people learning Torah. You have to learn Torah, no matter how difficult it is. I started Reb Chaim Kanievsky. They asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky, you know, what do you call it? His son-in-law, his grandson, by marriage, his grandson asked him, he went through a period where he was sleeping for 1 hour a night. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. He was sleeping 1 hour a night. So his grandson asked him, how are you able to do it? He says, listen, I got a lot of people coming to me. I don't have time to finish my daily quota, so I can't sleep as much. He didn't explain how he functions. You know, this is what I got to do, right? Sometimes a person is learning, and you got to work at it. So there's a tsar. Not only that, the Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, before he broke the luchos, if a person would have learned Torah before the luchos were broken, you would have learned Torah and you just remember it easily. Could you imagine remembering what you learned 2 days ago? Could you just imagine? Do you ever imagine how something could be so easily forgotten? Hi, what are you learning? 1 second. Baba Kama. Yeah, Baba Kama. No, that was last month. No, Baba Mitzia. No, yeah, Baba Kama. What are you learning about? 1 second. Was that the thing? What was about? It broke out at night. No, that was last week. How could it be so hard? I remember stuff that I read when I was 15. I remember stuff that I read, the secular stuff that I read when I was 15. I read it once and I remembered it. You learned Torah. I remember what I learned for you a week ago. So the Medrash says, had Moshe Rabbeinu not broken the luchos, Torah would have been smooth, easy. Just remember it all. When he broke the luchos, there was a special decree that came out that Torah is learned through tribulation and through difficulty, and a person has to sweat at Torah to understand it. And often it's the people who don't have money, and the people, guys learning in Kollel do not have a lot of money. I don't know, rumors notwithstanding. I don't know. Guys learning in Kollel struggle, and often guys are running around. Their wife has to work because that's what it takes. That's the San Ben Tzvar. Okay, take a look at. I wanted to go back for 1 second. When in that pasuk that we did 20 years and on, Mi ben esrim shana, pasuk gimel, Mi ben esrim shana v'mala kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael. Now this is also one of the modern Hebrew has kind of created a certain impression on us, and it's unfortunate because the people who made the modern Hebrew language were not religious, though they were very, very proficient in the written Tanakh. So Mr. Ben Yehuda, who put together the modern Hebrew language, which is one of the reasons that the Gedolei Yisrael objected to it, did not like teaching in Hebrew. In Europe, they always taught in Yiddish, and there were yeshivas to this day that will insist on teaching in Yiddish, because doing something in Hebrew can make you think that you're doing something holy. And with all due respect, falafel is nothing holy about falafel, even if you say it in Hebrew. And if you say chips instead of French fries, there's nothing holy about that. And what happens is, because the Hebrew gives you the feeling, well, I got this Jewish identity, so it's actually, you lose more than you gain. By the way, they only missed by 1 vote. The national language, when they made the state of Israel, the language of the country, English, missed by 1 vote. English missed only by 1 vote. Could you imagine? Can you imagine yell? It would have been so much more pleasant that we could yell at a bus driver in English and not be laughed at, or ask him to open the back door. Slicha, Charlie, and everybody's, and amuse everybody. We go, yo, open the door. That would have been so much smoother. Yeah. So in modern Hebrew, there are distortions. For example, what is that called? That light? What's it called when you turn on the? Or, what's electricity called? Chashmal. Now, the problem with that is that chashmal is a description of the angels in the most esoteric, highest level prophecy of the prophet Yechezkel when he's describing God's throne, that their appearance was like the appearance of Chashmal. He didn't have electricity as far as we know. And then when they made the modern Hebrew language, so they called that thing Chashmal. And then what happens to you is that when you read the Nach, if you ever learned the Nach, you say, wow, they had Chashmal too. Right? It's almost like when you say Tehillim and you see a pasuk that you had heard in a Shweki song, you say, wow, David HaMelech sang this also, right? That's sort of what came first, the chicken or the Shweki, you know. So the you know what I mean. So the what do you call it? The same thing happens. The same thing happens with the word tzava. Ask anybody, what's tzava? Army. Okay. The only problem is that by the Levium, when the Levium go to the Ol Moed, they're called that they entered the Tzava, the Torah says later on. And they certainly didn't go, the Levium didn't even go to the physical fighting army. So Rav Hirsch defines the word Kol Yotzei Tzava as public service. Yotzei Tzava means the public service. There are different types of public service. There may be a public service of serving in the Beis HaMikdash, and there may be a public service of going to fight the enemy. But whatever it is, it doesn't mean, by definition, it doesn't mean army. That's what the word tzava. Okay, we'll hold it here. We'll continue tomorrow. I'm going to switch over with a few more names.